Hiya, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
You want to go do a podcast?
Sure.
Jump in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barbies and Kens, Kellys of all ages, and everyone else, welcome to Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and with me I have my wonderful co-host. I don't need him to tell me I'm brilliant. I know I'm brilliant. John.
You already know, so.
Yep. For those of you who are just joining us, we are a podcast about Barbie movies. Each week we watch one of the straight-to-DVD animated Barbie movies and we rate its story, characters, animation, voice acting, and music to see how it stacks up. This week we will be tackling the 14th animated Barbie movie and her first ever Christmas special, Barbie in a Christmas Carol. And with us to discuss the movie we have a Christmas Carol fan, my very own dad.
Hello, everyone.
So, usually we start out by asking for your Barbie history, but since you're here for the Christmas Carol episode, we want to know your Christmas Carol history. So, when did you first read the book? Have you seen any other movies?
Okay. I don't remember exactly when I first read the book, probably back in high school or something like that, but it's been several years ago that I reread the book and really enjoyed it. I enjoy how Charles Dickens brings the spirit of Christmas into a book that kind of challenges us to get out of our day-to-day lives and see the more important things around us. I've watched different adaptations of it. I've seen the Bill Murray adaptation, Scrooged. I've seen the 1984 Christmas Carol movie, which is a pretty classic adaptation of it, I think. I've seen the Muppets adaptation. I've seen, I don't remember which other, I'm sure I've seen some other ones as well.
Yeah, and now the Barbie one.
And now the Barbie one.
So yeah, this movie was released on November 1st, 2008. It actually got a limited theatrical release. I don't think this is the first one to get a limited theatrical release, but it is the first one where I specifically found information about it. It was released via Kid Toons Films, and they were a company. They would release completed animated content for kids in theaters, in like very specific theaters, not everywhere in the country. They also, over the course, they released several Barbie movies, some Thomas and Friends, even some My Little Pony movies. Just sort of in a few theaters for a few days. Yeah, the DVD release happened 3 days after its theatrical release on November 4th, 2008. It didn't premiere on TV immediately. It took a few years for that to come about. But the Fairytopia team is actually the team that worked on this movie. We've talked about sort of these two parallel development teams. So here we have the director is William Lau. He did a bunch of the Fairytopia movies as well as Princess and the Pauper. And it's written by Elise Allen, who once again is the main writer on the Fairytopia movies. And as we've said before, it was based on the 1843 story by Charles Dickens, which is one of the most adapted works in English literature.
Oh,
Is it like right behind Sherlock Holmes?
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes is up there, a few of the Shakespeare's.
Dracula, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very often visited property. You can find adaptations of it in pretty much every genre, pretty much every decade that film has been a thing. There's theatrical adaptations, audio adaptations, anything you can imagine, which it's a pretty short book, so it lends itself well to adaptations. Before this podcast, I listened to the audiobook, and on times 2 speed, it is 10 minutes longer than the Barbie movie adapted from it. So you can easily read it in an afternoon. And it was kind of a huge deal when it came out. It very much changed the way people saw Christmas and the idea of Christmas as this holiday for charity and sort of looking beyond yourself and seeing the good of humanity. That's something that this story helped popularize.
Has there ever been a claymation adaptation of it?
Oh, I'm sure there has been. If not a direct one, at least something in like a series or something.
I mean, almost every TV show has done a Christmas Carol type episode.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, and even you have the Muppets version that was briefly mentioned. You have there's a Mickey Mouse version. There's so many there. I was looking, there's a My Little Pony episode that's an adaptation. Yeah, it's kind of a very well-known story because it's this sort of iconic Christmas carol that or Christmas story that has endured for so long.
It's public domain.
Yep.
And the name Scrooge is just used as a word, like don't be a Scrooge.
Yeah,
People.
Scrooge, Bah Humbug,
Yep.
even Merry Christmas was a phrase before the book, but the book helped popularize it.
God bless us, everyone.
Yeah. The idea of the three spirits coming in and visiting, and it's very iconic. And yeah, this movie adapts it pretty faithfully. Oh, before we go there, I should mention that the score for the movie is the original score is by Eric Colvin, who's the Fairytopia composer, but the music was conducted and produced by Arnie Roth. He's the guy who does all of the princess movies, so kind of a bringing the two of them together for this one, and it uses several famous Christmas carols to sort of add to the story. Yeah, it's a pretty faithful adaptation, at least the most faithful of any of these Barbie movies in terms of the adaptations. It keeps the structure, the themes, the basic plot. We have our Scrooge character, Eden Starling, who is kind of stuck up and selfish, and she gets visited by these three spirits, three ghosts of Christmas, and they take her on a journey through her own life and into seeing different people as well and their perspectives, and kind of teach her a lesson about charity and kindness. It starts out, Kelly is back. She disappeared for the last movie, but she's back here. We have a framing narrative once again, and it's Christmas Eve, and Kelly doesn't want to attend a charity ball. There's this. They never really explain what it's for, or I guess maybe Barbie says it's for a hospital.
Yeah.
But the specifics aren't important because Kelly doesn't want to go because that's not the normal Christmas tradition. So to get her to go, Barbie tells her a story that is very tenuously related to Kelly's situation.
It's the exact opposite.
Yeah. It's kind of odd that this was the story, but these framing narratives have always been a little bit weak.
This one particularly because the film ends and Kelly's like, I'll go to the ball. But the story should have affected Barbie in that, you know what? This story was about coming together for Christmas. I'm not going to go to the ball. Screw the hospital. Let's have Christmas.
Yeah, I wonder if the framing narrative was kind of developed as because it's the charity ball and charity is such an important theme in the book.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Whereas less so in the movie, which I think we'll talk about a bit. But yeah, I wonder if that's the reason why, and then
because in the movie the charity was kind of thrown out as an extra piece because originally they all wanted to go home for Christmas, but then you see that one of them goes off and does the charity event and then goes home for Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the adaptational changes, which we'll get to maybe a bit more later as well, is the whole economic and societal aspect of the original book has kind of been de-emphasized in favor of the more personal kindness, which when you think this is a movie for kids, kids aren't usually underpaying their workers directly. No. Maybe their parents are, but the kids aren't usually.
Actually, no, kids would underpay their workers.
But very few kids that would be watching this Barbie movie are in a position where they are responsible for the economic well-being of other people. So it makes sense to kind of push that to the side and focus more on this idea of kindness and personal connection.
Although it does talk about her firing all her workers.
Yes.
And then the other one in her shoes says I'm not going to help anybody and gives her some little thing.
Yeah, it's still there, definitely. But yeah, the plot is we have Eden Starling. She's a theater owner in this case and a star instead of Scrooge is sort of a businessman.
She's not exactly established as the theater owner.
Yeah.
She just refers herself to the star, which is confusing in the beginning for me. Being a theater person myself, I'm I'm very confused about how she has this power over her workers.
Yeah, I assume she's the owner of the theater. Maybe she's just like the act that brings in the most money, and so therefore she has the power, but
How does she own the theater?
Yeah, because if she owned the theater, she couldn't have wound up so broke at the end, maybe. But I don't know.
Who's the director? Is she the director? I don't know. Who's the
Yeah.
stage manager?
yeah, it's a bit of a tenuous theater structure, but it works out, I think, in the end, because that's not really the focus of the story so much as this sort of tale of Eden learning to become a better person.
I'm focusing on it.
Okay.
It's my world.
Yeah.
They didn't have enough actors to get a theater owner and a director and all that stuff, so they threw it all into one person.
Yeah.
They have the worst rehearsal practices ever. Her line at the end is like, "Go home for Christmas. We'll meet again in 2 weeks when our show opens."
Yeah.
That's gonna be the worst opening ever because they're not rehearsing right before the show.
Yeah, I kind of interpreted that as it's sort of a variety show where each person does their own little thing. So we have the juggler.
So vaudeville then?
Yeah, because we have the juggler who unicycles and juggles and doesn't have much of a personality elsewise. Then we have the magician guy. Then we have the two ladies. I assume they dads. And then Eden is the big draw. She's the opera singer.
And somehow when they had to be at work on Christmas Day, they were all just kind of sitting there in the sideshow doing nothing, and she was out on stage until she finally realized they were there. But they didn't seem to do anything together.
Yeah.
Practice for the big show coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah. What do they do? I don't know. Why they're rehearsing? I don't know. It's really the stage hands that need the work. They put everything together.
Yeah, we never, I mean, Eden mentions the stagehands as sort of like a derogatory, but
Why don't they get fired?
I don't know.
probably because we never see them.
Hmm.
But yeah, Eden does this big show Christmas Eve and then comes into the back room and she's not in a good mood and she tells everyone they have to come in and work on Christmas or they'll be fired. And Eden's best friend is named Catherine Beadnell. She's kind of taking the role of Bob Cratchit from the original, but she's also kind of filling the role of Scrooge's sister and Scrooge's nephew, sort of as this lifelong friend who's been around and who's looking out for Eden's well-being, but is maybe a bit frustrated by her as well. And yeah, that night Eden is visited by the ghost of her Aunt Marie instead of Jacob Marley, who is suffering the consequences of her earthly selfishness. She has these chains with mirrors. Yep, mirrors instead of money. And Aunt Marie has sent for 3 spirits to visit Eden that night to help her change her ways. So again, we're following pretty closely the structure of the original book. We start with the spirit of Christmas past, who takes Eden back to her childhood, where we see Aunt Marie, who raised Eden, who's constantly pushing her to practice singing, and it's Christmas Day in this case, in the scene that we come into, and Eden doesn't want to sing, so she sneaks away over to Catherine's house, where there's this big party, and it's very familial, and everyone's happy, and then Aunt Marie shows up and makes sure Eden never spends Christmas with them again.
It's interesting. There's a pretty big difference there because in the book, he rejects kind of all the influences of his past, which in the book are shown as good influences. There's his sister, his first employer, the guys that worked with him at his first job, and they all celebrated Christmas and wanted Christmas to happen, and he kind of retreats into himself, becoming more and more greedy. Whereas here, Eden is following a specific bad example given to her in her childhood, which she at first rejects. And then at some point in time, which isn't very well explained, she comes to decide that, oh, actually, Aunt Marie was right and everyone else was wrong. So it doesn't quite follow the same thing as Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. I think the way I interpreted it was that Aunt Marie is kind of filling the role of Scrooge's father, but then, of course, in the book, Scrooge's father eventually we never see him, but he eventually becomes a better person.
Uh-huh.
Whereas here it's, as you noted, Aunt Marie is this sort of negative influence that really isn't in the original book at all. Maybe an externalization of this idea of selfishness.
Wasn't there a professor?
Maybe there was. I guess maybe I don't remember the book quite well enough. But
not
there wasn't a very big negative figure in the book.
Yeah.
Most of the past is shown as very positive, but Scrooge kind of, he was sent off to a boarding school, I guess, at one point, and that was a negative experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when his sister comes, she says, "But Father said you could come home again, and you don't have to come back," and whatever. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think, where they're getting the Aunt Marie thing. I don't know if there is the sense that, like, when he's a bit older, he's had these influences on him from other people, but we never see that play out. The scenes are all very focused on
his greed, his internal
They
greed.
talk about it after the scene. When she comes back to the present, she talks about what Marie does after she's found out the party. She talks about how she understood everything once she was 13 and got her first performance, which really would have been more interesting to see. But I think Marie's outrage would probably be too intense for kids to see.
Yeah, and I also think that they were limited somewhat in budget.
Probably.
They reduce all of the spirit visits to single moments and single scenes. But yeah, after we see this little scene from the past, then the spirit of Christmas Present shows up and takes Eden to her theater where her staff are having a party and they're mocking her, and Catherine shows up and joins in, so Eden feels a bit betrayed that her best friend they're throwing tomatoes at a poster of Eden. And then afterwards, they follow Catherine, who goes to an orphanage where she has been helping some of the orphans put on a Christmas pageant. And at the end of that scene, there's sort of this idea introduced where the orphanage doesn't have the funds to keep going, and they will be closing down before spring unless someone can come in and help them out. And on that note, we next move on to the Ghost of Christmas Future, who is the most radically different from the book.
Oh yeah,
they toned down the intensity of everything.
Of course.
Where in the original book, the Ghost of Christmas Future is meant to represent death, both sort of symbolically and somewhat literally. But here, the Ghost of Christmas Future is just another spirit, not all that mysterious or ominous. She takes Eden to a potential future. They make sure to emphasize that all of these are potential futures, where Eden has fired all of her staff for being late on Christmas Day, but the new acts she hires are not up to par, and she ends up completely broke, destitute, and one day finds out that Catherine has found this success as a fashion designer. So Eden visits Catherine, her old friend, but finds that Catherine has become just as selfish as she once was, and sort of, as was alluded to before, kind of throws Eden out with a scarf that isn't really going to help against the winter cold. And Eden then wakes up on Christmas morning and has a new resolve to live her life better. She gives all of her staff presents and Christmas bonuses, and as you said, John, gives them 2 weeks off for the holiday, even though they have a show opening.
Yeah.
And then she attends the pageant at the orphanage and pledges to keep it open. And then she joins Catherine's family once more for Christmas. And then back in the framing narrative, Barbie's friend Nikki shows up, and she, Barbie, and Kelly go to the charity ball.
Hooray.
So yeah, very similar to the original story, but with
Not
some
quite,
changes.
but yes.
It's more similar than any of the Barbie movies have been. There's more faithful adaptations of the Christmas Carol out there, but
Of the hundreds of there are, yeah.
yeah.
I was wondering about the colors of past, present, and future. Past was gold. I wonder if
Yeah.
that's referring to like the golden times, maybe. I don't know. Present was green, as in green and growth, and then future was red, maybe as in warning. I don't know. I was wondering if that
Yeah.
had something to do with it, but definitely three Christmas colors as well: gold, green, and red.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that was a consideration put in. I think the gold and the green are often associated with
Past and
past
present.
and
Right,
present
because
in
the
the
Ghost of
book.
Christmas Past in the book is a flame, and at the end, just like in this one, she tries to snuff it out. In the book, Scrooge actually takes a candle snuffer and puts it on top of the ghost's head. You
Yeah.
know, the Ghost of Christmas Past. And present, yeah, is like makes everything, touches things with his wand and makes them grow. So it's definitely a green idea there. Lots
Yeah.
of plentifulness and harvest and fruit and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, the red for the Ghost of Christmas Future is
Because I'm going to put black with it more with the
yeah,
book.
which I think they're really toning it down for the kids,
Uh-huh.
which is odd because like the Muppets Christmas Carol, even the Mickey Mouse version aren't afraid to have that sort of ominous.
There's another factor. You gotta sell toys. Gotta get that nice red dress.
Yeah, that too.
Right. So you have to sell a toy of the Ghost of Christmas Future. Yeah. And I think, too, in the book, death is one of the interpretations, but also time. Time and decay, I think, is another interpretation of the Ghost of Christmas Future. What happens
Okay.
when we don't relate to others, when we hole up inside of ourselves, is we just wind up with time and decay, and there's nothing else. I mean, there's nothing else out there.
Yeah,
It's kind of the idea.
which then would make sense as to why the Ghost of Christmas Future is completely silent.
Hmm.
Sort of this isolation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the story makes some smart changes to the book. And some maybe changes I was a bit
Oh, yeah.
disappointed with, but I understand, this is a movie for young kids. It isn't gonna go as ominous as it
Yeah.
could. The main theme is this sort of kindness versus selfishness. We have Aunt Marie is saying this quote, and it gets repeated quite a bit. In a selfish world, selfish people succeed. And that's kind of her mantra that then gets passed down to Eden, and in the future that we see gets passed down then to Catherine as well. And it's a theme that is more relevant to kids, sort of this idea of selfishness versus kindness. It's sort of a personal thing rather than a societal thing, whereas the original book is doing it's a personal thing in the original book of Scrooge, but it's also sort of a critique of Victorian economics and sort of this,
Rewarding of greed.
yeah. Because in the original book, it's very much commenting on sort of this society where charity is not well thought of. You have Scrooge is in the beginning offered this chance to donate to a charity, and he asks, "Are there no poor houses, no prisons for them to go to?" And if you are familiar with the history of poor houses, they were terrible living conditions where people did menial labor for very little money and just did not help solve economic problems. But for Scrooge, he sees, well, I'm here making my money and they can worry about making their money. Where then throughout the book, he's kind of learning to be more charitable, and in the end, he makes this large donation and raises the salary of his employees and sort of becomes more generous with his wealth. In the Barbie movie, it's all about the personal kindness and interpersonal relationships. And the charity aspect is kind of off to the side. It's not missing. We have the orphanage subplot, but
The stakes aren't as drastic as in the original, because no one dies.
except for Aunt Marie.
Yeah, but
So, as a ghost, she's more goofy than she is.
She's
Yeah.
already dead in any case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tammy just disappears.
Yeah, the Tiny Tim character here is Tammy, who she doesn't have that much of a role. I don't know if she has more than 2 or 3 lines. And that's one of the bigger changes, which might get a bit into characters, but Catherine here is sort of the Bob Cratchit stand-in, but she's very different from Bob Cratchit, where she has this lifelong relationship with Eden, and then also we don't really get the sense that she's struggling economically.
Right.
And then the family aspect as well, where all of the characters have been aged down, so she doesn't have a family of her own, that she doesn't have any kids or anything. But with Catherine, one of the interesting things is this theme of selfishness as a cycle, where we start with Aunt Marie's selfishness, which leads to her mistreating Eden, and that mistreatment leads to Eden sort of becoming selfish herself and mistreating Catherine, and then in the future timeline that we see, Catherine has become selfish, and that leads to her mistreatment of her assistant and of Eden. So, I don't know, I found that an interesting idea that the original doesn't explore that, as you were saying. The original presents Scrooge's past as sort of these positive influences that he goes back and learns from them, whereas here it's sort of the negative influences that get perpetuated over time.
Yeah, in the book as well, Scrooge falls in love with a woman, and as he goes on making money, his love then switches to money, which is how we see him grow bitter. Here, again, it's cut out for just the scene where she just talks about how it happened versus being shown it.
Yeah, and that's the movie definitely simplifies, which is interesting because as I was saying, if you read the book, it isn't that long. Like the book on double speed, the audiobook, takes 10 minutes more than this movie. So the stuff that they cut out is, I can see why they cut a lot of it out, but also they add quite a bit in as well to kind of recenter the storylines a bit and bring in different focuses. Yeah, the scariness is toned down quite a bit.
I mean, yeah, it is. Instead of death, she gets to cluck like a chicken.
Yep. Yeah, that is a good joke, I thought. I thought it was an effective joke. But yeah, it does. The future isn't nearly as ominous here. And even when Aunt Marie shows up, they play it for comedy. She keeps falling over and tripping on things, and it's never scary. Where the original book actually describes Scrooge's fear throughout different parts very specifically. And a lot of the adaptations actually lean into this idea of almost sort of turning it into a horror movie for the whole Ghost of Christmas Future segment.
Even when Jacob Marley comes, it has that tone as well.
Yeah, and it's done also to make each ghost distinct, because the Ghost of Christmas Present usually is a much more pleasant one to go to. Here, a lot of the ghosts just feel the same.
Yeah, you don't have nearly that contrast. And I don't know, I understand what the movie's doing, but I do kind of miss those grown-up ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think for me, it made the ending hit a little less hard. Because in the original book, you have this contrast between, okay, you have the Ghost of Christmas Present, who's this jovial, happy, and everyone's excited and having fun. And then you have the Ghost of Christmas Future, which is this sudden change into very dark, very dour, very sad. And this idea of, oh, Scrooge is headed towards death. And if he doesn't change his ways, he's gonna die alone and sad.
Yeah, it's more than death. It's dying alone with no one even to worry, no one even to inherit any of what he did, and no one who even cares that he died, other than the people who are profiting from selling off his stuff.
Yeah, and you even end up at his gravestone. And then when you switch back to Christmas morning and Scrooge realizes, oh, he still has a second chance to do
Right.
good, that's such a powerful moment in this story.
Of redemption, you could say.
Yeah. Whereas here it's, you go from, okay, Eden is destitute and she's not living a good life, but it isn't nearly as powerful, I found.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a trade-off because you do have, again, this is a movie for kids, that for younger kids even maybe than the Muppet or the Mickey versions. But I do almost wish that they had let it go a little bit more ominous at the end.
Right now, it's fine. It's not amazing, but it's doable.
Yeah, you still get the character arc, which is the important thing. So I give the story overall a 4 out of 5. I think it's the Christmas Carol base narrative is so good that
Yeah.
even with the changes they make, it still works really well.
Yeah, I gave it a 4 as well. They are cheating because they're just reusing a classic, already amazing story. But, it's still fun.
I gave it a 4.5. I really like the story of A Christmas Carol, but there again, more because of the story, not because of what they did with it.
Yeah, it's such a powerful story on its own that
It's hard to screw up too much.
Yeah. Yeah, onto the characters. First off, we have Eden, who's easily the most flawed Barbie protagonist we've had yet. Like, no contest at all. And I do respect the fact that rather than... Because I could see a version of this where the Barbie character is instead the Bob Cratchit character.
Mm-hmm.
And we bring in someone else to play the Scrooge character. Someone who... Because there's such a... Barbie has such a specific brand and a specific style. And you can even tell the movie goes out of its way to be like, this isn't Barbie. She's just playing this character.
Well, yeah, right away, Kelly says she's mean, and well, you're sure she's mean? And
Yeah. They're going out of their way to... But they still center it on the Scrooge character, and it's the same model they've been using for Barbie all of these movies, so...
With a bit of a tweak here. She's got a mole.
Yeah. Yes. She doesn't look exactly like but it's exciting given how many of these we've watched that are, oh yeah, the Barbie character is kind, clever, and brave.
Uh-huh, yeah.
And yeah, the movie isn't afraid to show how terrible she is. But they also make it clear that it's not everything about her and that this character is able to change.
Yeah. I mean, you can also distinct this as not being a Barbie character. Particularly as well because she's not being voiced by Kelly. Once again.
Yes. But the Barbie herself who shows up in the framing narrative is, which is how Kelly gets her credit in this movie.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that later.
But yeah, Eden's arc is central to the entire idea of the movie. That's just part of what makes A Christmas Carol so powerful, is this central arc. And it's kind of funny that Scrooge in popular culture means sort of miserly and mean, whereas in the book it ends with, I believe there's an exact line that basically says, from that point on, Scrooge meant happiness, and kindness and generosity. So the character arc he goes on is, and Eden in this movie goes on, that's the entire story here.
Yeah, I wonder if with a name like Eden, it goes better towards a new beginning than a name like Scrooge, maybe.
Yeah. And they do still get in because it's Ebenezer Scrooge becomes Eden Starling. It's not as similar as some of the other names, but it is. They're...
Right. But she goes by Eden, whereas he goes by Scrooge.
Yeah, I thought she was a very interesting protagonist. And even her backstory, you really feel bad for her childhood struggles, and you're rooting for her to change.
I mean, I don't have much to say. She's a Scrooge character. They're all the same if you look at them close enough.
I agree with John. She's a Scrooge character. She starts out very selfish, there's a very marked change in the end.
Yeah, I do think it's fun when she's, because they're playing off of, rather than the miserly businessman, they're played off of the sort of the
Spoiled actress.
yeah, the diva sort of personality, which makes for an interesting change. I don't know that it factors in much, but she has some good lines at the beginning that really sell her. Sort of the one I quoted at the top of the episode. I don't need you to tell me I was brilliant. I know I was brilliant.
But then there's Catherine, the complete opposite of Eden.
She's a good foil. She's the one who's kind, clever, and brave. She's, as we kind of discussed, she's not really Bob Cratchit. She doesn't have the same sort of economic struggles, and she has this lifelong relationship with Eden. But I think she's a really interesting addition to the story, to have this character who has a parallel life with the Scrooge character. Because in the book you have Scrooge's sister, but she has passed away before the book starts. And then you have his nephew, Fred, I believe, who he knows Scrooge very well, but doesn't have that same lifelong connection. Whereas Catherine here has that lifelong friendship with Eden. And she still sees the good in Eden. She hasn't given up on Eden.
Fred is kind of a continuation of his mom in the original, and he also sees the good in his uncle. Or tries to bring out the good in his uncle, at least. Saying, I'm going to keep inviting you even if you never come.
Yep.
And I'm going to keep saying Merry Christmas even if you call it a humbug.
Yeah, sort of the unendingly positive influence. But then here they introduce the idea of what happens if can that person be corrupted by the same selfishness? I don't know if I buy her sudden turn into selfishness. Her character up until that point has been very
immune.
Kind. Yeah. But it works well for the story they're telling and the themes they're developing. Next up we have Chuzzlewit.
Story could have done completely without Chuzzlewit.
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
Barbie always has to have some sort of sidekick.
Yep.
He's the worst for me.
He's the Bibble of this story.
No, Bibble at least does stuff for the story. Chuzzlewit doesn't. He's just there. They keep bringing him along. He doesn't want to, but they keep doing. And he doesn't do anything.
Yeah, he just distracts. All he does is distract from what's going on.
They keep telling the exact same joke with him. He wants food. He tries to get it. Guess what? He's a ghost. He runs. Animals see him. Guess what? He's a ghost. Why doesn't he see himself in the future?
And I don't understand exactly how the physics work with him either, because he doesn't go through the table, but he does go through all the dishes. And they do explain he can't have food, but they don't explain why he can go through a wall, but he doesn't go through the floor, and why he can slide through dishes, but he doesn't slide through the table.
If other animals can see them, why can't he see himself?
Right.
I mean, yeah, you have to have him in here for the kids.
No.
But, yeah. I mean, it is telling that a lot of the adaptations for kids actually do add in some sort of animal sidekick for Scrooge.
But then have him actually do something.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't find anything interesting for Chuzzlewit to do. And he's not particularly cute either.
He's Garfield.
Not even new Garfield, old Garfield from the original comics.
Well, I'm talking about the Bill Murray Garfield.
Oh, the Bill Murray.
Just lays around and eats.
Yep. Next up we have Aunt Marie, who, when she shows up, she's very goofy.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
falling over her own chains and knocking into stuff, and yeah, there's
How she's doing that, I don't know.
yeah. I do like the moment where Eden, as someone who's in the theater, immediately expects some sort of stage trick. So she's waving her hand over to see if there's any wires, and I like that moment. But for her appearance as the ghost, she's not very interesting.
I think the only interesting thing about her as the ghost is that here you actually see that she's sorry about her past and what she's done. Whereas in most other adaptations, Marley isn't. He's more of this ominous presence, where here she's just sad about what she did.
Yeah.
Which is the only thing I like about this one.
And here they add the element of she's the one who raised Eden, and she recognizes just how much she's responsible. Whereas, as Dad mentioned before, in the original book and in a lot of the other adaptations, the past influences on Scrooge were very positive things. So, and I think Aunt Marie's role in the past is more interesting than her role as the ghost. She's actually more ominous as a human than as a ghost. When she shows up at the party, it's kind of this moment of just
things are going to go down.
Yeah, and they don't even need to show what happens. You feel it in the performance and in the animation.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have the ghosts. So first, there's the Ghost of Christmas Past,
which they actually call spirits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they use the word ghost at all.
Yeah, I wasn't paying close enough attention. I've been using the two interchangeably here.
Right.
But yeah, I think that just has to do with the...
They don't want to make it a ghost story.
Yeah.
Ghosts are spooky.
And yeah, the Ghost of Christmas Past is...
A lot.
Yeah, very manic.
Mm-hmm.
Very sort of grab your attention.
I thought of Tinkerbell.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Even maybe Tinkerbell from the Tinkerbell movies. I like the touch of her being a fan of Eden. Like that's just a fun little thing that is a change that makes it a little bit interesting, but it doesn't factor in to anything.
There was one bit that they had where she forgot something in her bag, and I thought that they were using that to make her character forgetful, because the past is something that we often forget details about. And I was wondering if, like, oh, are they going to do something like that? But no, it was just a joke.
Yeah, and I don't know. For me, every adaptation, The Ghost of Christmas Past is my least favorite, but especially with this one.
They're all so different, too.
And she's actually the most distinct of the ghosts in this movie, whereas usually the Ghost of Christmas Past and Present are more similar.
Yeah, this one's wild. Perfectly cast by Tabitha, because she's wild as well.
I think part of the reason Chuzzlewit is so annoying is because of how much the Ghost of Christmas Past interacts with him.
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe a bit too much there. I think if you cut Chuzzlewit, the Ghost of Christmas Past would also be improved here. But yeah, next up we have the Ghost of Christmas Present, who's...
I hardly remember that one, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember one thing, but that's for later.
Because the Ghost of Christmas Past is so manic that the sort of cheeriness of the Ghost of Christmas Present doesn't hit you as hard.
No.
Whereas in the book and in a lot of the adaptations, the Ghost of Christmas Past is maybe a bit more melancholy and somber. Somber is a better word for it, yeah. Whereas here there isn't. It's actually a step down in terms of energy.
Yeah, where the present should be more jolly. It's Christmas. Ho ho ho! I'm Santa.
I like her outfit.
Bring blessing and goodness to lots of people.
I do like her outfit, the sort of Christmas tree inspired with all the different ornaments, and she even has a clock, sort of bringing
Right,
in
because
the...
her clock makes noise or something at one point, doesn't it?
Yeah, and she actually pulls it up and says, "Oh, I'm late for my next thing," which they take out the aspect of the spirit sort of dying and fading away,
Uh-huh.
which makes
I
sense.
wonder
'Cause...
why.
Yep. But yeah, not the most memorable of the three ghosts.
No.
Yeah, and finally we have Ghost of Christmas Future, who is, I think, the best of the three, but kind of by default.
Mm-hmm.
She's a bit more of the somber one, but not really menacing in any way.
No.
Right.
I do like her design. The red dress is very striking. I wish she had kept her hood up for a bit longer. She is introduced with the hood, but then immediately takes it off.
Yeah, probably not the best version of the future ghost out there.
That might honestly still be the Muppets version is very, very well conceived. Of all three of the ghosts, I think, actually. No, actually, no. The Ghost of Christmas Past in the Muppets is a bit too uncanny.
I kind of like the Jim Carrey one.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that one in a while. I remember the motion capture being a bit odd, but that's true of the Polar
They
Express as
do
well.
something interesting visually with that one that stands out.
Yeah, I'll have to rewatch that one. We've been trying to watch a different version every year, or
Yeah.
at least I have.
I wouldn't mind watching the Jim Carrey one. I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing.
Yeah, I had my Christmas Carol binge like 2 years ago.
Okay.
I told you about this. It was because one, my university was doing a musical performance of it. I was hired to work on a high school version of it. And then I just watched as many versions as I could because I just felt like it.
Apparently not the Barbie version, though, if this is your first
No,
time
I did
with
not
it.
watch the Barbie version. And I got the book for Christmas but I didn't read it.
It is worth reading. And yeah, if I haven't stressed it enough, it's short. It is an afternoon read. Even anyone in the audience as well, like take the afternoon and read it. It holds up incredibly well. There's a reason that it's adapted so often, and there's even a new adaptation coming out later this year.
Of course there is.
Actually, by the time the episode drops, it might already be out.
There's a film out there about Dickens himself writing the story.
The Man Who Invented Christmas, I believe, is the title.
That one. That's an interesting one as well.
Again, yeah, one of the most adapted books, and specifically for the three ghosts element is brought up in a lot of things, even not direct adaptations. I was thinking of It's a Wonderful Life, which is probably my favorite Christmas movie, has that sort of being visited by spirits, though it's very different in that one. It's being visited by an angel and being shown a different version of your life rather than sort of the past, present, and future of your life. But
And it's almost the opposite of Scrooge, where Scrooge is a bad person who thinks he's just fine, and in It's a Wonderful Life, it's a good person who thinks that he's never done anything that mattered.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean, and that one, the movie itself is sort of less focused on Christmas, and it's a larger story than just the...
But it's interesting that it does end at Christmas.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, it's a Christmas classic, so...
Uh-huh.
Yeah, next up on our characters list, we have Freddy, who I would guess at one point was supposed to be the
Fred?
stand-in for the nephew Fred, but he doesn't serve that purpose at all in the story. I don't know that he has any significant interaction with Eden until the very end.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
just the shy romance for Catherine.
Yeah.
I guess you have to have a romance in a Barbie movie at some point.
Yes.
Yeah, there's occasionally been movies where they've sort of decentralized it. Like the first Fairytopia, there's a scene.
Mm-hmm.
But here, it is interesting that it's not Barbie isn't involved in this romance, but
Right.
it is still there. It is still,
Because you could easily do A Christmas Carol without a romance scene.
yeah, because the original doesn't have
No.
a direct, like we
Well,
see
it has
in
it
the
in the
past,
past,
yeah,
but there's no. It doesn't have to end with a romance.
You could have had her Ken in the past, but that'd be kind of sad.
yeah. What I like about Freddy is that he's just sort of the nervous person who you feel for him.
Yeah, I like that the romance isn't on Eden. It's not on
Yeah.
our central character. It's on a side character.
It works. I don't think it needs to be in here though. It's not as annoying as Chuzzlewit.
No,
It's
not at all.
fine. It's there. What else is there is the other performance.
Yeah, they
They're
show up.
there. They throw a few tomatoes. That's about what you remember about them.
Yeah.
And the orphans, they're sweet in that movie orphan kind of way. They aren't like any actual kids would ever be, but they exist.
Yeah. They have
serve the
amazing
purpose.
vocals too. They sound like adults.
Yeah. Well, actually, they sound like the Chicago Children's Choir.
They don't. Those are older children.
Okay.
They don't match those models. That's for sure.
They show up. They serve their purpose. There isn't much to it.
They show up. They sing a song. Tammy says the line. End of the
Oh
film.
yeah, doesn't
Yep.
she say "God bless us" or something like that?
Yep.
Everyone. I don't know. And she has a little crutch,
Mhm.
Yep.
just like Tiny Tim.
You gotta have it.
Yeah. But finally, I did want to spotlight the hypnotist. He has a good joke in the movie. That's about it.
I wouldn't say so, but okay.
It got me. The setup for it. I'm like, brava. That's an odd word. And then as soon as it cut to the stage, I went, oh, I know where this is going. It is taken directly from the original book. You know, the
The
scene
hypnotist.
where the scene where Scrooge gets hypnotized and then goes on stage and clucks like a chicken.
I must have missed that one.
Yeah, most adaptations don't adapt that part.
I wonder why.
Overall, I gave the characters a 4 out of 5. I think Eden in particular is such an interesting protagonist for one of these movies that I just wanted to highlight that with my score.
I gave it a 3.5. And this partly has to do with just the Christmas Carol story, is that most of the characters are focused on Scrooge in this film, Eden. They have a lot of side characters, but there's not a lot of depth to them. The ghosts they're fine. The performers, they have designs, but they don't have a lot of personality. There's not a whole lot brought in for Tammy, who is supposed to be a great motivation for Scrooge. But yeah, no, really, the standing characters here are Eden and Catherine. But there's a lot of characters in this film.
I gave them a 4 for characters because I thought I did enjoy that they developed Eden more complexly than they do in most Barbie movies for the main character. But yeah, I think the side characters in general were lacking as well. There wasn't a whole lot of character development for the side characters.
Yeah.
Except maybe Catherine. But yeah, Eden and Catherine is about it.
Yeah. I would agree that it's... Yeah, next up we have animation, which I thought was really solid all around.
Looks like we had some new models for Barbie and Kelly specifically.
Yeah, so full disclosure to our audience, we're recording this in the Diamond Castle episode out of order. I did watch the Diamond Castle before this one just to kind of get the progression, and the animation of Diamond Castle I was not impressed with. Here, I think I am very much impressed, and I think they might be using the Barbie model from Diamond Castle.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
The first thing I noticed, I knew immediately that it was a new model because it looked off. But then once she started speaking, Barbie and Kelly's faces are so expressive, more that we had seen them before, which I was really impressed by. But the rest of the film was okay.
Yeah. I really liked the backgrounds and the character animation and like the
Right.
magic.
Yeah.
All of the magic stuff looks good. All of the locations looked really solid. I thought
Yeah.
Diamond Castle I was disappointed in, especially the locations and the sets, whereas here it was all of them felt like real locations.
I will say, though, at the end where they turned their carriage into a sled, when they're moving, when you're not focused on the wide shot of the full sled, it just looks like they're moving on their cobblestone, because the snow disappears, and that sled would not move on cobblestone. I'm telling you, it's gonna drag. But then at the end, they finally put in the snow. But why turn it into a sled? Their journey back is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, that was not something I had considered watching it. One of the things I loved here was the costumes and the hair. And I actually I've been watching through as we do these, I've been watching through the ranking Barbie movies costumes on historical accuracy, the video by the YouTuber Karolina Zabrowska, who's sort of an expert in these fashion and historical costumes. And she gave this one really high marks for how it imitates the Victorian styles. And even just watching it, I could tell that these costumes look different from any Barbie costumes we've seen before, and they are very historically inspired. And the
Yeah,
hair design is all different. The colors are all great. It stood out to me.
it could also just be because there's so many adaptations of their story. There's a visual style to take from,
Yeah,
and the style is accurate.
yeah, I was impressed.
Yep. And that way they can sell new dresses and models of the Barbies.
Oh
Yep,
yes.
that is always at least somewhat of the. This one had a lot of costumes compared to some of the other
Mm-hmm.
um, Barbie movies as well. So lots of opportunities to sell things, which is maybe not in keeping with the original message of the story, but
Well, yeah, and even their adaptation, where economic prosperity becomes the big thing, um, as a positive thing rather than
yeah,
the negative, kind of the negative thing like it is in the original.
yeah, the framing narrative, which we assume since they're going to a charity ball that Barbie and Kelly are a bit wealthy, that maybe is influencing the changes that Barbie makes as she tells Kelly this story.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, well, we won't talk too much about the economic side, but we'll focus on the kindness and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Any thoughts on the animation, Dad?
I haven't watched most of the other ones, so I was not incredibly impressed with the person animation. I thought a lot of it looked fake, but it's probably better than some of the other ones. But I definitely agree that the backgrounds and all that were very well done.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't stand up. 2008, I believe, was the year that Wall-E came out.
Uh-huh.
So when we're looking at sort of the theatrical animated films, it definitely doesn't quite stand up to
Right.
what's coming out at the time. But I mean, compared to these, especially just coming off of Diamond Castle, which I was disappointed in, yeah, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. That's how much I liked the animation here.
Yeah, I give it a 3.5. It's very consistent with all the other films.
And I also gave it a 3.5.
Next up, we have voice acting. So we, once again, same as Mariposa, we have something or someone else as the Barbie character. Morena Banks plays Eden Starling. She's actually a British actress doing this British character, which is maybe why her accent is the only really solid accent in the movie. She's done a lot of voice acting. She's probably most well known for her role in Peppa Pig. I'm not familiar with the character she's played, so I don't know much beyond that. But she's very prolific, and I don't know. I thought she knocked it out of the park here.
She did.
She gets every aspect of the performance right. She's great at the snooty and the stuck-up part of Eden's character, but then she also sells the sincere moments.
Yeah, and there's a distinction between the two, because as soon as she flips, you can hear the flip in her voice.
And even throughout the movie, she's having to
Go back and forth, yeah.
yeah.
Because towards the end of each ghost, she kind of goes back into the, oh, I don't believe it anymore, back to the snooty.
And Kelly, as Barbie, she does her normal job. I'm kind of starting to feel a little sad, because I believe we're getting close to the end of her run as Barbie.
Yeah, we're moving towards there.
Yeah, it's gonna make me sad to hear a different voice.
Yeah. She's been around. She was the voice of Barbie since the very first movie, so other performances I really liked. I believe her name is Candice McClure, who plays Catherine. I thought she was really spectacular. She doesn't quite nail the accent, but her performance is nonetheless pretty great. And yeah, most of these side characters, again, this is a Canadian voice acting team, so their grasp on a British accent is tenuous at best.
Right.
Yeah, one of them that stood out to me was Pam Hyatt as Aunt Marie. She's played before Madame Carp in Pride and Prejudice, and she played the wise fish in Mermaidia. And
you mean Princess and the Pauper?
Oh yeah, Princess and the Pauper is where she played Madame Carp.
Yeah.
And this is more on the Madame Carp side of things. She's leaning very heavily into a very particular accent. There's a line she says that reminded me of a meme that I'm going to have to find and edit in here. But she goes, "Much better."
Much better.
Okay.
Very, very sort of stereotypical. I believe that's sort of more lower class London accent. That it just stood out to me as kind of silly. But yeah, I don't think any of the performances are bad, even though a lot of the accents aren't great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's convincing performances.
Yeah.
All of them.
Two other performances I'll point out. Tabitha as Spirit of Christmas Past.
Oh yeah, a little bit annoying.
But she nails that high energy spirit. And I believe, and the other one I want to point out is the Spirit of Christmas Present, who is voiced by Kathleen Barr. For me, this is the most impressive performance because she's been doing Barbie movies for a long time as well. This is the first time where I could not recognize her voice.
Oh.
She was unrecognizable, but it's her. I'm very impressed by that, because sometimes it's very difficult once you know an actor's voice to just not instantly hear it. In this one, I could not instantly hear it. It was great.
Yeah, I didn't notice, though. I'm not as good at recognizing the voices as you are, or not recognizing them in this case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Other performances, I talked a bit about Candice McClure here, but I didn't give the context. She is a TV actor who's best known for Battlestar Galactica, among other things. And then another actor here, very first Barbie movie, is Gwyneth Walsh, who was a TV actor is a TV actor who worked on Star Trek The Next Generation. I believe she played a Klingon. So,
and what does she do in the Barbie movie?
She plays the Spirit of Christmas Future.
Okay.
I thought her performance was very good. Not enough that I made special note of it, but I did want to sort of shout out, since we have a few actors here who are new to the Barbie movies, at least. And then also worth noting that most of the actors don't do their own singing voices.
Right.
Oh, we do have, and we'll talk a bit about that with the music, but we do have different people doing the singing, and I think everyone does a good job matching the singing and the vocal performances.
Until the spirits sing, because they sound nothing like each other.
It worked enough for me that it didn't take me out of the movie, but
Right.
I didn't notice.
once again we do have Melissa Lyons playing the protagonist, though now she's working with Morwenna Banks instead of Kelly Sheridan, and I thought she did a very good job. I gave the voice acting overall a 4 out of 5. So again, very good. I think the tenuous grasp on the British accents kind of brings it down a point, but especially Eden, Morwenna Banks's performance as Eden was absolutely stellar.
Yeah, I give it a 4 as well, because the voice acting is typically solid as usual.
And I gave it a 4 there again because it didn't usually distract from the overall story. I thought it fit with what was happening.
Yeah, and finally we have the music.
Cheaters.
and
Just using all the classic Christmas songs you can have.
well done. Very, very well done.
Again, it's difficult to mess up a Christmas Carol, and it's difficult to mess up these Christmas carols.
But I think the Barbie movies, from what I've seen of them, always have good music. I mean, that's kind of what they're based on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
many times.
The Princess and the Pauper and all of the ones that have been musicals especially have been, well, and anyone that Arnie Roth has worked on. I think the Fairytopia movies have been a little bit shakier in the music front, but
I'm thinking of Rapunzel and Swan Lake and some of those. Yeah.
Yeah, the ones they use, anytime they use classical songs, it's always great.
Yeah. And to be fair to Eric Colvin, who did work on the Fairytopia movies, I think his original tracks work well here. But the centerpieces are the classic Christmas songs. And yeah, we have a bunch of people doing different ones. We mentioned Melissa Lyons returning once again to sing here. We also have Leanne Aria is playing the voice of young Eden, who has a song alongside Shantina Fleming, who's playing young Catherine. Then we have various ghosts of different Christmases. We have Leanne Aria again, playing Christmas Past, Lisa Roth, Christmas Present, and Kelly Bixby, Christmas Future. So yeah, a lot of great songs here, and I just did want to give credit to the people who sang it. Yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say about the music. Overall, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Again, they're using the classic music, but they're using it well, just like the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I give it a 5. It's hard to go wrong with using classic music.
Yeah, and I also gave it a 5. It always enhanced things, never made it worse. Except maybe the very beginning when Eden sang her first thing, but then you realize later that was meant to sound bad. So.
Yeah, she's overselling her "Oh Christmas Tree" performance.
Right.
Oh Christmas tree, how lovely are thy
Yeah, which leaves my total score 20 out of 25, 80%, and a 5-star rating of 4, which makes this my second highest numeric rating.
Both Dad and I had the exact same overall score. We both had 21 out of 25, which is 84%, or a 4.2 on the 5-star rating. Yeah, it's up there for me as well. And our averages are actually really high. Looks like it's just above Island Princess, and also just above Rapunzel. So that pushes it into our top 3.
Yeah, personally I wouldn't do it that high, but yeah, is what it came out to.
I think what happens is you have a really good story with really good music, and they just use it.
Yeah.
So that pushes it higher than maybe it would be otherwise.
Yeah.
A Christmas Carol is always a good direction to take a story. It's a tried and tested story that works pretty much no matter how you do it. And then Christmas carols work wonderfully. The animation, the voice acting are all great. So yeah, it wouldn't be the first thing I would think of when I think Barbie movie, but it is still very, very well executed. Thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to follow us on social media. We are Binging Barbie Podcast on Instagram, at Binging Barbie on Twitter, and Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast on Letterboxd. There you can find an up-to-date list of our Barbie movie rankings and see where this one falls. And join us next week for our discussion of the next Barbie movie, Barbie Presents Thumbelina. This is I believe our first movie where the Barbie character will not be playing the protagonist.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. It's an odd one. I'm curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see.
But yeah, on that note, thanks everyone for listening.